Bunmi Ahmed, thank you for the super chat. She asked, how can I transition my 4-year-old twins to carnivore? They love pasta and rice, etc. That's understandable. And sometimes it takes a bit of tough love to sort of transition kids, because they're just used to these things. They don't know why they can't have them anymore. They enjoy them, and so on. But, you can just talk to them and explain to them, why, that this is, it's not really all that good for you. This stuff is better and all that sort of stuff. But you can also just do it in a very subtle way where, you just don't have as much in the house. Maybe you start, cutting it down, or they say, oh, you want some rice and pasta? Oh, sorry, sweetie. We don't really have that. I'll have to go to the store, but we do have this other nice thing that you like. So the different sorts of meats that they like, eggs that they like, prepare those. And so it's not that they're going from, well, they're not allowed to have pasta, which they love, and they have to eat this other thing, which they really don't like all that much. You're making them eat like, liver or something like that. And they're just like, oh, no, I'm not doing that. That's going to be a harder sell. But if you are making sure that they're getting foods that they really like, meats, fatty meats and eggs and things like that they really like, then you can say, oh, yeah, we don't have that tonight. Sorry, we're not going to be able to have rice tonight, but we do have this other thing that you really like. And so, that's what we're going to have, and you can slowly transition these things out of the house. And then all of a sudden, they're 4, so, 4-year-olds are not dumb, but, it is something that you can sort of change their environment, and they'll get used to it fairly readily, and they can adapt and actually just be very fine with it. And constantly you're educating them, because they're just sponges for information and knowledge at that age. And so, you can just talk to them about how important this is, for them and their growing and their growth and their brains and all these sorts of things. So it's like, well, the pasta is not really good for you because, we want you to grow strong and want you to be very smart. And so this food is better for that. And for all these different reasons. And you can explain in as much detail as you think that they would be able to understand. But that's a way you can do it. And just, 4-year-olds, you think back to when you were, 5 or 6, young kid. We were young. We didn't know much, but we weren't dumb, and they're not either. And so, if you explain to them and don't bullshit them, if you just tell them what's going on, and say, why, it's better to eat these sorts of things, they'll pick that up. And again, you can sort of just, slowly filter these things out. So there's just less and less of this junk in the house. And then they're getting used to eating, this good food, and then they like it. And so then with the education on top of that, then they understand why they're doing it. So when they're out and over at other people's house, they'll make good choices when they're on their own as well later on in life. So that's how I would approach it anyway.